So for the final presentation of the symposium, Arti and I just wanted to briefly reflect on the inclusion working groups last year, and also touch on some of our future aspirations and what we hope to achieve throughout the rest of 2023. But first, just a quick slide to introduce you to all of the inclusion working group members, apart from 2 photos, which I wasn't able to get in time. I did send out the invite very last minute, so apologies to Sarah and Alex for not having you on here visually. But I thought it'd be helpful just to have this page available. I know a lot of you probably have been with us since 9 AM this morning, and you would have seen all of us at some point, but just kind of reflecting and viewing the variety of the roles that we have within this working group and how we are working collaboratively together, but also in terms of where we are quite geographically spread across the UK and how some of that work comes together in terms of moving forward some of the practice within our departments. So before we go into a bit of detail about future aspirations, Arti and I wanted to reflect on some of the challenges and successes over the last year, which has been echoed quite a lot within the presentations earlier today. And I think probably everything that's on this slide has been spoken about in some way, shape or form earlier, but please do bear with me and apologies for any repetition. I do also encourage others from the inclusion working group to chip in and add in any additional comments and reflections if we have time towards the end. So the first reflection I wanted to touch on was EDI being viewed as a newly recognised area. I do put that in parentheses because it's not to say that great work around EDI hasn't been achieved in the decades prior to the last few years. It's more so the acknowledgement that there seems to be suddenly a huge influx of information and policies, good practice, frameworks and guidance absolutely everywhere you look. And ascertaining which one works for you can often feel quite overwhelming, regardless of where you are in an EDI journey. And this was also felt, with us in the working group. In terms of understanding the scope of practice, within this working group, it became quite difficult to understand what our remit actually was. And it continues to be quite a challenging conversation that we have internally because of all the work that is currently happening within our partners. It then becomes difficult to know where we fit in terms of progressing EDI more strategically nationally and where we can actually encourage other leaders to engage and take that first step. So we were quite hesitant at the beginning to duplicate a lot of the work that was already being done and wade in where we may not have been best suited in terms of both expertise and experience, or simply starting on a particular area of work, such as looking at research workforce, which we were really keen on doing. Without stepping on other people's toes because the work was already happening in the area. So it did become really important to have an understanding of who was doing what and where it was happening and what we could do as a working group to spread the word to our colleagues. In terms of the measurable outcomes and dissemination of best practice, again, we were quite conscious of providing robust evidence to share and disseminate with our colleagues, but also aware that this work couldn't be and wouldn't be a quick win or a one-size-fits-all solution to all of the EDI problems. All organisations and teams, as we've touched on during this morning, operate in a slightly different way, are based in different geographical areas, are exposed to various communities of diversity, and as a result, face their own unique challenges. So we didn't feel that we could say, right, here's a framework, implement it, it will work for you. So hopefully some of the resources that have been shared so far throughout this day and some of the ones that will hopefully signpost you to at the end will be helpful in encouraging you to start that journey if you haven't already, but also maybe an additional form of resource that will be able to help you progress what you've already done. Arti will also touch on this in a bit more in the next slide. Again, as mentioned, time and resource to complete this work has been really difficult. So a lot of us are working and dedicating time to the inclusion working group on top of our own individual work within our own organisations, some of that full time. So it's finding the protected time against a lot of the other priorities that are happening within our own teams to dedicate to this work and come together to be able to review the policies and the frameworks and just meeting to share some best practice and have these continuous conversations about what we can do to try and move a lot of this work forward. As a result of this, progress can feel quite slow, but our presence here today, I think, is a true testament to what can be achieved in a relatively short period of time. I think especially considering we've probably only met over a span of 12 hours in the last year. So it's great to be able to come together just to be able to do something like this. And I'll pass you over to Arti, who's a bit more positive in her reflection. So hopefully that will balance the negativity that I've just gone through.
Thank you, Mona. I don't think it's negativity. I think it's like a genuine reflection around thinking about how productive we can be based on our constraints that we already experience in our day-to-day, our day jobs, I guess. But I suppose the things that I kind of wanted to talk about was around the personal reflections that I had and the kind of positive experience that it has been for me joining this working group. So I suppose, as Mona has already kind of touched on, we've got members from across the UK, across England here, and being part of this kind of group has allowed some joined up work. So we can, personally, I find it difficult to dedicate time to keep up to date with all of the kind of resources that are around, the new policies, the different kind of, scopes for best practice, those kind of things. And so it's really difficult to kind of stay on top of it. And this group has allowed me the opportunity to kind of share those experiences. So it's not, the onus isn't on me to kind of take that time every single week, every month, to set aside protected time to have a look at it. Other people are doing this work and other people are comfortable in sharing that kind of scoping. So it's really been quite useful in terms of, keeping up to date and sharing of resources. I definitely think that having this kind of space to discuss difficulties was really important. So I think a couple of us have dealt with challenging situations, which has been quite positive to be able to discuss openly within this group, so we can all share an understanding and kind of get this sense of the fact that we're not alone in doing this work. And also, how to be better at being anti-racist is also like a thing that's been present in my mind. And having colleagues where I can discuss who I can discuss this with has been really useful. So the next point that I wanted to kind of go across is the reflection and the learning and sharing. So I'm a very reflective person, and so this kind of working suits me very well. And so I like the fact that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not understand, but to show a willingness to understand. And it's nice to be alongside peers who facilitate that kind of working as well. And then finally, the diversity of the working group members definitely does help conversation. So this difference in our group in terms of roles, in terms of seniority, in terms of gender, in terms of ethnic diversity. So there's lots of different perspectives. But I think the main thing that I take from that is that there's no pressure to feel as though like we represent the whole of our ethnic community. So I'm like a second generation Indian. I don't feel like I represent everyone's perspectives who comes from my ethnic group. And that's nice because, as much as I like feeding into conversations, I don't want to feel like I have to have that burden on my shoulders. And it doesn't feel tokenistic, which is really nice. Like I don't feel like I was included in this working group because of who I am and the background that I represent. And so, just generally, it's been a really, really positive experience for me. So in terms of our priorities for next year, sorry, I'm just getting my notes up. So our kind of key areas that we want to focus on is kind of reviewing our terms of reference. So these were written prior to us joining the inclusion working group. So things have changed since then, and other partners and stakeholders have made strong headway in this field. And so we need to dedicate some time to review our terms of reference and our strategy. We also want to develop a UKRD inclusion pledge, which is aligned with other partners. That includes the NIHR, REPAG, CRNs, just to kind of make sure that we're working in line with other people. And finally, we want to review whether we may need more members as part of this working group. So currently we sit at approximately 8 different sites. And so not everyone is available to join every single call. And then the work can be quite challenging in terms of finding the time to dedicate to this cause and on top of work commitments. It'll be useful if we can kind of review if we need more members. And then finally, we also considered whether we could introduce a peer advisory group or a panel of individuals who are patients, carers, or public contributors from underserved groups. In terms of communication, we wanted a specific time to dedicate to develop the inclusion working group website and to develop an area for key resources that have been reviewed and utilised by ourselves and partners. And that would include ideas for best practice and case studies and those kind of things. So it'd be really good to kind of have a shared resource that everyone can access. And then finally, we would love to host the next symposium next year. So we want to showcase our learning and the progress we've made at the next UKRD working group in 2024. Cool. Yeah, thank you.
So just put the last slide on there. Sorry, Nick, to interrupt. In terms of how to get involved, we do have a UKRD newsletter as well, and have just linked some of the key resources that we referred to quite a lot in this meeting, and an additional one that I did sneak in there around the RDS in terms of the EDI toolkit.